In 2022, I was working as a software engineer for the U.S. Department of Defense. Everything looked great on the outside. I had a stable career, my income was above average for a medium cost of living town, I was taking serious steps towards buying my own property, and my family was proud of me. Except there was one problem. I was in the middle of an existential crisis, and all of the time that I was spending developing software was not making it any better. This is part 2 of the 3 things that I did instead of buying a house that ended up making me rich. The second thing I did instead of buy a house was quit my 9-to-5 career. If you're feeling trapped by your career, these are the 3 things that helped me through my own career pivot that can help you too. The first thing that I learned was that permission can come from financial milestones. The real reason why most people stay in jobs that drain them isn't because they love the work. It's because they haven't built enough financial security to have other choices. So to bring you up to speed from part 1, it's now February 2022. I had been trying to buy a home for 2 years with no success. And at this point, I really felt like I was doing the best that I could. I had reached my goal of finding a software engineering job in Monterey, which is where I wanted to be. And I was also somehow balancing early retirement with house hunting, but everything around me actually felt really out of control. And this is because at the end of 2021, 6 of my family members died in a tragic car accident. My uncle, my aunt, and 4 of my cousins. When my dad called me, I was actually in the middle of reading a research paper about just how effective financial education is on financial literacy and behavior. It was a curiosity of mine, and I was also deep in this subject and like creating content about it. So this is just kind of like an evening thing that I was doing that day. And when my dad called to tell me, it didn't feel real. And I was really confused, like how 6 people can pass all at the same time. And about a couple months later, I got a 3-sentence email from work stating that my tech lead had passed. Nobody mentioned it in subsequent meetings. Leadership basically was acting like it didn't happen. Maybe they talked amongst themselves, but when we all got together, nobody mentioned anything. And there was something really cold and unsettling about this. And the thing that made it weirder for me is that I had never actually seen my tech lead's face because he was working remotely in a different state. So I never got to see his face. I just knew what he sounded like from conversations that I've had with him, both one-on-one and through meetings. And because I was working from home for most of my working relationship with him, it kind of felt like he passed in my home. And I had already been in a reflective mood about the brevity of life because of my family's accident. But this time when death got closer to my home, my internal bells were just ringing louder and louder by the day. I couldn't help but think, what if that was me? What if I had passed and this is the role that I was in? I got this overwhelming sense that I would not have been proud of myself, to be honest. And so the way that I was using my time started to actually make me a little anxious. And on top of this unsettling internal conflict, work was actually getting worse. And I was getting more frustrated by it because I had absorbed somebody else's job. They had been with the company for 20 years or so, and they were in a senior data engineering position. And for some reason, I absorbed his role even though it wasn't software engineering. So I was doing my job plus his job now. And it was honestly keeping me up really late because I wanted to do a good job. And ultimately, I did a great job at taking his role on, but I never got a title change for it and I never got a pay raise for it. And on top of that, the world was starting to open up slowly again. And so we had to go back into office. Not full time, but about I think it was 1 to 2 days a week. Luckily, the company that I was working for got a new building, which meant that I no longer had to work at this dusty and old military hospital. Even that situation somehow led to me putting the nail in the coffin. It came time for all of us to put in our office requests. So all of the software engineers, the quality assurance team, as well as customer service, and like the project managers, all put our requests in. And if I'm remembering correctly, the software engineers got to put their request in first. And there was only 3 of us, so we all chose corner offices. And when we got our office assignments, everyone had gotten their selection except for me and the other female software engineer. I was given an office right in front of the office that I had requested. And guess what? That office was empty. Whoever was in charge decided that that office would make more sense to have reserved for any executives or management that were visiting, which by the way was almost never. Obviously, I was extremely bitter about this. My eyes are like super sensitive, so the office that I had, I was unable to turn the lights on because the LED just is the worst possible thing that you can give to my eyes. There I was sitting in my new office in the dark, right across from a perfectly naturally lit empty office. I obviously spoke up about it in a respectful way, and I ended up getting my corner office that I had wanted with the 2 windows, but I would be lying if I said I didn't feel completely underappreciated. Because at this point, not only am I just being overworked in a role that I didn't even sign up for, but now I've been there for 3 years and I still have not gotten a raise. And honestly, with the pace of government, I didn't really expect one just because things move really slow. But I was officially uninspired, unstimulated by the work, and feeling very underappreciated. But there is some good news. It's now April 2022. And I've reached a $200,000 net worth. And with that, I had also reached Coast FI, meaning that if I didn't invest even a single penny more into my portfolio, my nest egg would still grow. It would still compound to my full financial independence number by the time I was 65. And now that wasn't the plan. When I first learned about early retirement, my plan was to continue investing and to continue working as a software engineer until I had reached my financial independence number. But given everything that was happening externally and internally, I couldn't help but think of other options. I'm so glad that even though I was trying to buy a home, I was still investing because that milestone gave me peace of mind and it gave me permission to make a different choice. That is the beauty of financial independence milestones, especially ones like Coast FI. When you know your future self is taken care of, it really gives you the freedom to be able to make decisions now that prioritize your well-being and even your dreams, especially if they change. So if you're feeling trapped in your career, calculate your Coast FI number. It might actually be lower than you think. Once you reach Coast FI or another meaningful milestone, you'll have options. You can switch careers, you can go part-time, or you can start something new and take calculated risks that you just couldn't before. That's exactly what I did. I built enough financial security to give myself options, even though that wasn't the original plan. The second thing that I learned that can help you as you transition your career is to create transition bridges and not dramatic leaps. A big mistake that people make when changing careers is thinking that it has to be all or nothing. What if instead there was a bridge? While I was contemplating this career change, I was contributing on a part-time basis to a university as a curriculum developer, and they actually offered me a full-time role with them. But after looking through the job description, it honestly felt like a lot. And despite them offering to match my salary, I was still in my reflective period, and the way that I was spending my time really mattered a lot to me. So I actually ended up turning it down, but then I got an idea to actually ask if I could do this part-time with benefits. And luckily, my supervisor, who was also the director of the program, took the extra steps to work with HR to create this new role for me. And the role would be 4 days a week. My thinking was that I could do this role while I built out my own personal brand. My aspiration at the time was to create a physical financial independence journal because I had built an audience of 20,000 followers since 2020. And this role actually felt really aligned to my strengths, and it was really mission driven. So I knew I could produce good work and still work on my own thing on the side. So Easter weekend came in 2022 and I put in my notice. I unintentionally, symbolically put in my notice on Good Friday when I was having my one-on-one with my manager. And what I told him is that I had been thinking about this decision for a while. I didn't tell him that I had a part-time job lined up. Instead, I told him that I would really like to take a risk on myself and build something out entrepreneurially before I had kids, because I didn't want to look back at this time in my life and have some regrets that I didn't at least try. And that was all absolutely true. Of course, I didn't have a business plan, but having that part-time role felt like I at least had something. So my last day working there full-time was May 5th of 2022. I did end up staying there on a part-time basis for about 2 months to hand off my role to the next person while my paperwork was being handled for my new job. And something incredible actually happened when I made this transition. It was now August 2022, and I had been at my new job as a learning engineer for about a month now. And August is my birthday month, so I bought myself a 3-month planner. And in my planner, I wrote that my goal was to grow my Instagram account of 20,000 followers to 50,000 followers. And later that month, I was at an in-person retreat with my team. And I remember looking at my notifications during the breaks. I made a comment to my coworker saying, "Whoa, this video is going viral." It had like 400,000 views, and she asked me what the video was about. And it was a short video about early retirement. And at the same time, I had started a series which was also beginning to pick up. And it's funny because that series made its way to my coworker's feed, and she asked me if it was okay if she followed me. And by the end of 2022, I had grown my account to over 215,000 followers. I honestly took it as a sign that I had made the right decision. Most people think that career changes require dramatic leaps, but actually what I have found is that it's often more sustainable and effective to create these transition bridges. Here's how you can build yours. First, identify what are you looking for from this career change? Is it more time? Is it different work? Is it better alignment with your values? You might not need to change. You might just need to restructure a bit. The second thing you could do if you don't need to change completely is you might want to consider part-time versions or contract versions of your current role. Many employers would rather you negotiate for that because they don't want to lose a good employee. Third is you want to use your new time to experiment with what is next. You don't have to quit to figure that part out. And fourth, run the numbers. My part-time salary plus my other jobs ended up giving me more money than my full-time job alone, with better work-life balance and even more fulfillment. But it could be the case that you actually don't need to out-earn your current role, but play around with the numbers and see what you can afford to do. The goal here is not to escape work. It's to design work that serves your life instead of consuming it. The third thing that I learned from this experience is to diversify your identity, not just your portfolio. We talk about diversifying investments, but what about diversifying your identity? The strongest financial position doesn't mean anything if you're trapped by who you think you need to be. Here's the truth. Even though I had a pretty decent level of financial safety, and I had the perfect opportunity bridge. Quitting my job was not simple. I experienced a ton of internal resistance, despite knowing in my bones that this career was not for me. My dad had immigrated to the US when he was 16. He sacrificed a lot of his life to make sure that me and my brother were safe and that we had a roof over our heads. And he had successfully convinced me to go to college. And before him, my grandpa had come to the US to work in the Salinas Valley as one of the braceros from the bracero program. That's actually how he earned his money to buy a property in Mexico. I remember my dad telling me that I didn't need to worry about making over $50,000 a year. But there I was making more than my dad thought was enough. And I was pretty much at some peak of my ancestors' dreams. And at the same time, all of my peers from college were climbing the corporate ladder in Silicon Valley. They were buying houses, cars, and even investing way more than I was. So despite reaching these ancestral heights, I simultaneously felt behind because I had taken the less prestigious route. Just a couple of years before this point, I had a job offer at one of the largest tech companies in the world in San Francisco. I had gotten a return offer when I was interning in 2016. So right off the bat, I had an opportunity to make a six-figure income right out of college, but I decided against it. So now, if I had left the career path entirely, I felt like I would have left all the adults down who had invested in me. All of my teachers who were really committed to computer science and that I had built good relationships with. One professor, for example, worked at Bell Labs, and he was like a serious researcher, and I really valued his opinions of me. And if you don't know, there was a lot of inventions that were made at Bell Labs, including the Unix operating system. That's the operating system that Mac OS uses, for example. I also felt like I had let down the people who had funded my undergraduate degree. I got a full ride scholarship from this family. The man behind that foundation immigrated to the US and built up a fortune in the Salinas Valley area. He created this orchid farm, and he invested millions of dollars into the program that I went through to get my degree. He had this vision to help the youth of Salinas Valley experience upward mobility, and his daughter eventually became the CEO of the orchid farm, and she actually offered to pay for my master's degree. I did a year of a master's degree from Georgia Tech in computer science, but then, realized that's like not what I wanted to be doing with my time. This was back in 2020. So I felt like I had let her down enough times that if I made this decision, I for sure would let her down again. So essentially, I kind of felt like by quitting computer science, I was just letting so many people down in my personal life and in my professional life for different reasons. But here's what I learned. Your identity can become a prison if you're not careful. When you define yourself too narrowly as either you're a software engineer or you're a doctor or you're a lawyer or a teacher, it becomes harder to make changes that actually serve you later in life. This is an ongoing journey, but there are 3 concepts that have really helped me overcome this mental challenge. And these 3 concepts have ultimately helped me pick what's right for myself as opposed to what my family or society wants from me. The first concept is the Odyssey Path. It's actually in this book here called Designing Your Life. It's by 2 Stanford professors. They have a whole course about it in the design school at Stanford, but through their book, they've made this available to the public. And Odyssey Path is this idea that you can design multiple versions of your life and choose the one that is best for you rather than locking into one path. So this is a really good structured experience to help you really see where would you end up in 5 years if you followed what your family wants from you, what society wants from you, versus what you want for yourself. This framing was incredibly helpful in helping me make a decision. And the second concept is this concept of a portfolio career. And this is something that I've come across recently that has helped with this, because even 2 years later, I still found myself kind of struggling with how to make meaning out of all of these things that I've done. Like if you go to my LinkedIn, it feels to me like it's all over the place. But this framework really helps me conceptualize my career as more of a portfolio. And this is a really helpful term that was popularized by Anna McKenzie. With a portfolio career, your career is not static. Instead, it's ever evolving. And instead of just being one thing, it's actually a lot of things because of that evolving nature of it. It involves pursuing multiple passions and interests, basically exactly what I have done. The third concept that has really helped me is this idea that is in this book called The Good Enough Job. And this idea is the idea of identity diversification. Instead of putting all of my identity in my work, the author suggests to put your identity into more leisurely things as well, like your family and your hobby, for example. And what I love about these is these are like very subtle shifts, but they're really powerful. They have given me the permission to feel like I'm evolving without abandoning who I really am. In fact, they are enabling me to become more of who I actually am. So if you're sick of your job, the solution isn't to necessarily quit dramatically. It's building the financial security to give yourself options. It's diversifying your identity so you don't get trapped by titles. And it's creating bridges to what's next as opposed to leaping into unnecessary risk. These 3 lessons have allowed me to free myself from living someone else's dream. And instead, it's enabled me to build a life that 80-year-old Anita and 8-year-old Anita would be proud of. I've been able to reinvent my work and even heal my relationship to work. I no longer feel like I need to make career decisions fueled by scarcity or status. And I don't feel like I need to be making somebody else proud. Instead, I get to make decisions that are deeply aligned to who I really am, and I get to turn to my inner wisdom who always knows what to do next. I'm free from doing things the right way because, look, I do not want my job to be my identity, and I don't want my career to ever feel like my prison. And guess what? You don't have to wait until full financial independence to make more meaningful career decisions today. Looking back, if I had bought a home built on top of this insecure career foundation, I would have felt even more trapped by my career. I'm curious, what is the one thing in your role right now that you feel like you're tolerating because you have to, but not necessarily because you want to? Sometimes simply naming it is the best way to start changing it. So let me know in the comments. I would love to get to know you a little bit more. I am on a mission to guide 1 million women towards their next financial independence milestone goal. So if you are FI curious, or if you just want to see me reach my next goal, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and like this video so my next video gets shown to you. And if you'd like to get started on your financial goals, I put my best resources for you in the description. And check me out on Instagram if you would like to get to know me more. And in case you missed part 1 of this series where I shared the first thing that I did instead of buy a home that ended up making me rich, I'll put it on the screen right now. I'll see you next week for part 3.